say.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Granholm, do you believe that the world can achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 without nuclear energy playing a substantial role?
I do not.
Okay. I agree with you. I want to go back to my thesis that I hope I articulated it reasonably well. But we don't have an overarching plan or analysis for achieving CO2. In my opinion, we're just throwing money at it. Let's suppose Professor Lundberg is right, 27 trillion a year. That's worldwide to achieve carbon neutrality and maintain it through 2100. Let's assume America's share, we produce 15% of CO2 emissions. That makes our share about $4 trillion a year. That's, I don't know, 8 to 10% of our GDP. Doesn't sound like much when you talk about it that way, but it's still $4 trillion a year, every year. That's money we can't spend on health care or feeding people, housing. What happens if we start spending $4 trillion a year, each year, for every year through just 2050? And China doesn't do its part, or Russia doesn't do its part, or India doesn't do its part, or Vietnam or Thailand. How much is our money going to reduce world temperatures, or the increase in world temperatures? The answer is zero, isn't it?
No, I don't think it's zero, but I do know that this is why we have global
But how much is it?
This is why we have all 190 countries signed on to get to net zero by 2050.
I know they've signed on, excuse me for
and
interrupting.
countries are moving in that direction, sir.
But they're not doing, I'm asking you, and I hope they do it, okay? If it turns out that the scientists are right. I'm not saying they are or they aren't. It's just that the whole topic has become so politicized. But we never talk about what happens if they don't and what is the likelihood that they will. And let me ask you again, if we spend $4 trillion a year, every year, until 2050 to achieve carbon neutrality in the United States, and President Putin and President Xi and Prime Minister Modi say, I don't think so. I think I'm going to spend that on domestic needs in my countries. How much are we going to reduce world temperatures?
With respect, I'm not going to buy into the hypothetical because they have said, I don't know about Putin, but the President of China and Prime Minister Modi have all made commitments to move in this direction and are spending money to move in this direction. But the better question is, or a parallel question would be, what happens if we don't?
Well, I'm interested in my question, though.
Well,
you're good, but I don't want you to change the subject. Have you ever known President Xi to lie?
Well, I am telling you what is
he lies
in
on
the
occasion,
plan
doesn't he?
and what we have seen in terms of their spending. They have spent about $400 billion a year so far. That was, I think, in 2023, on renewable energy. So
what
they're
about Russia?
Spending.
What about
they're
Russia?
Spending. Russia,
you
I can't
honestly
speak for.
believe that
I don't have the information on Russia.
President
They're
Putin,
not very transparent. But all of these countries have signed on to the...
Today's Senate hearing turned into a heated debate on one of the biggest questions of our time. Can the world truly reach carbon neutrality by 2050? Senators pressed Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm on the role of nuclear power, the massive costs involved, and whether the U.S. should continue investing billions or even trillions if countries like China, Russia, and India don't hold up their end of the deal. This exchange highlighted not only the challenges of climate policy, but also the clash between global responsibility and national interest. The discussion began with a blunt question: is achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050 even possible without nuclear energy? Secretary Granholm's answer was clear: no. She emphasized that nuclear must play a substantial role in the world's clean energy future. Senators then turned to the staggering cost projections. Estimates suggest reaching global carbon neutrality could cost $27 trillion per year, with the U.S. alone shouldering nearly $4 trillion annually. That's up to 10% of America's GDP every year, a figure critics argue could take money away from healthcare, housing, and feeding Americans. A major concern raised was the risk of the U.S. acting alone. What happens if China, Russia, or India decide not to fully commit? Senators pressed Granholm, arguing that without global cooperation, America's sacrifices might barely move the needle on global temperatures. Granholm countered with a different perspective. What happens if we don't act? She argued that inaction could lead to $38 trillion per year in global costs to clean up the damage from climate-driven disasters like floods, fires, and extreme weather. She also pointed out that countries like China are already investing heavily, spending around $400 billion in 2023 alone on renewable energy. The senator pressed further, asking if Granholm truly
goal. And my point is, if we don't, sir, if we don't, we will be spending globally $38 trillion a year to clean up after the extreme weather events that are happening because of climate change.
But you use that figure, but I've seen no basis for it. Professor
I can send you that.
Professor Lomberg says it's much less than that. But here's my point. Do we just start spending the $4 trillion a year and spend it blindly every year like clockwork? Or at what point, if China's not pulling its load, or Russia, or Vietnam, or Sub-Saharan Africa, at what point do we say, what model do we have in place to say, whoa, wait a minute, we're wasting our money because they're not spending theirs?
I believe that the United States and its leadership in this world, as well as our allies, are not going to throw in the towel. That this is too important in terms of our world, in terms of climate change going into the future and the devastating impact it is having right now, much less in 2050.
I'm out of time, but do you trust, look me in the eye, do you trust Vladimir Putin?
No, I don't trust him.
Our President Xi Jinping to do anything other than what is in their best political interest and the power that they achieve in the world. Do you really believe that?
And in China's interest, it is in their interest to move down this path because they are experiencing extreme heat waves and death as a result of climate change. And this is why they're spending what they are. And this is why they want to dominate these clean energy technologies, because they see an economic advantage for them to be leading in this. So, no, I don't trust what they say, but we will verify.
But you're willing, well, I've gone over. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Madam Secretary. I'll try to come back, or
Thank
not.
You. Senator Shaheen.
the future. This exchange revealed the core of America's climate dilemma, balancing enormous costs at home, uncertain commitments abroad, and the urgent need to act before climate change spirals further out of control. The question remains, should the U.S. lead boldly on climate action, or hold back until the rest of the world proves it's serious? So if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, comment, and hit the subscriber button for more political showdown. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.